The morning they demolished the Peterson building was the same morning I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I stood across the street, my silver-white hair whipping around my face in the autumn wind, watching as 53 years of Portland architectural history crumbled into dust. The wrecking ball swung with devastating precision, each impact echoing the hollow feeling in my chest. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" a voice beside me said. I turned to find Curtis Harmon, my former boss and mentor of 23 years, his hands tucked into the pockets of his camel overcoat. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Wouldn't miss it." End of an era. He glanced at me, his eyes softening. "How are you holding up, Eleanor?" 6 months earlier, I would have been inside that building, directing the Henderson account from my corner office on the 32nd floor. Executive Creative Director at Whitman & Associates, the advertising firm I'd helped build from a regional player to a national powerhouse. Instead, I was on the outside looking in, unemployed at 58. "I'm fine," I lied, the words bitter on my tongue. "Heard from Richard lately?" The mention of his name sent a familiar surge of anger through me. Richard Caldwell, 55, venture capitalist, the man who'd convinced me to walk away from everything. Not for weeks. I kept my eyes fixed on the demolition. "How's the Henderson campaign coming along?" Curtis hesitated. "We lost it. After you left." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. After I left, things fell apart. My team scattered to other agencies. The firm lost its creative edge, the merger with Global Media Solutions that was supposed to propel us into the international arena, dead in the water. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. "Eleanor." Curtis's voice dropped to just above a whisper. "The board is meeting next week. Global Media is backing out, but there's interest from Apex Digital. If you were to come back..." "I can't." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Can't or won't?" Curtis raised an eyebrow. "Look, I know Richard talked you into leaving, but..." "It wasn't just Richard," I interrupted, though we both knew that was exactly what it had been. "I met Richard at a charity gala 9 months ago. I was there representing Whitman & Associates. He was there looking for investors for his latest venture, a revolutionary hydroponic farming system that promised to transform urban agriculture." We locked eyes across the room, and 4 hours later, we were still talking. Champagne glasses empty, the gala winding down around us. Richard was different from the men I usually dated. Passionate, driven, with an energy that seemed to electrify the air around him. After my divorce 12 years earlier, I'd focused exclusively on my career, occasionally dating, but never letting anyone get close enough to distract me. Richard changed that. He pursued me relentlessly, expensive dinners, weekend getaways, late-night conversations about changing the world. "You're wasting your talent selling people things they don't need," he told me one night as we lay in bed, the Portland skyline glittering beyond my bedroom window. "Join me. We could build something meaningful together." His company, EcoGrow, was on the verge of securing major funding. He needed a marketing expert, someone who understood brand storytelling. Someone like me. "I can't just leave Whitman," I'd protested. "I've spent my entire career there, and what do you have to show for it?" Richard had asked, propping himself up on one elbow. "A corner office? Stock options?" "At some point, Eleanor, you have to ask yourself what it's all for." That question haunted me for weeks. What was it all for? I'd dedicated my life to Whitman & Associates, sacrificed relationships, postponed dreams of traveling the world. For what? To sell more soft drinks? To increase engagement metrics on social media campaigns? When Curtis announced the potential merger with Global Media Solutions, requiring another 5-year commitment from senior leadership, I made my decision. I would leave Whitman, join Richard at EcoGrow, and finally build something meaningful. Something that mattered. My resignation shocked everyone, especially Curtis. "You're making a mistake," he'd warned. "Richard Caldwell has a reputation. 3 failed startups in 5 years. He's charming, I'll give him that, but he burns through investors' money like kindling." I didn't listen. I was in love, not just with Richard, but with the idea of reinvention, of purpose, of starting over at 58 with my talent, my experience, and my beautiful white hair that Richard said made me look like a goddess of wisdom. Now, 6 months later, standing in the shadow of my former workplace as it was reduced to rubble, I was beginning to think Curtis had been right. "Let me buy you coffee," Curtis offered, for old time's sake. I hesitated, then nodded. What else did I have to do today? Richard was in San Francisco, supposedly meeting with investors, though his increasingly desperate texts suggested things weren't going well. We walked to Lambert's, the artisanal coffee shop where my team used to hold our creative brainstorming sessions. The barista, a young woman with a sleeve of tattoos who used to know my regular order, greeted us with polite indifference. "Just another customer now." "So," Curtis said once we were seated with our drinks, "what happened with EcoGrow?" I stared into my latte, watching the foam dissipate. "It's complicated. I've got time." I took a deep breath. The technology works. That's the irony. Richard's hydroponic system is brilliant, uses 90% less water than traditional farming, requires minimal space, perfect for urban environments with food deserts. I took a sip of my latte. But Richard, he's not a businessman. He spent too much on the prototype, alienated key investors with his my way or the highway approach. Then there was the lawsuit from his former partner claiming intellectual property theft. Is there any merit to it? I shrugged. Enough to scare away the remaining investors. We're down to our last few thousand in the business account. Richard's in San Francisco now, making one last desperate pitch to a venture capital firm. What I didn't tell Curtis was that I'd sunk my own savings into EcoGrow. $300,000, nearly everything I had aside from my retirement fund. Money I'd planned to use to finally see the world once I retired from Whitman. Gone. "And personally?" Curtis asked carefully. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Let's just say the charm wears thin when you're both staring financial ruin in the face." The fights had started small, disagreements over business strategy, marketing approaches. Then they escalated. Richard blamed me for not leveraging my industry contacts enough. I blamed him for overpromising to investors. The loving partnership we'd envisioned devolved into icy silences, and sleeping in separate rooms of the luxury condo we could no longer afford. "I'm sorry, Eleanor." Curtis reached across the table and placed his hand over mine, truly. "I made my bed," I said, pulling my hand away. "Now I get to lie in it." My phone buzzed with a text. "Richard. Meeting didn't go well. Need to talk. Tonight." I put the phone away without responding. "That offer to come back to Whitman," I said, looking up at Curtis. "Was it serious?" Curtis hesitated. "It's complicated. The board is divided. Some want you back, others think you burned bridges by leaving so abruptly. The Apex Digital deal would mean restructuring anyway. Layoffs probably. So that's a no. It's a, I don't know yet. But I'm fighting for you, Eleanor. Always have." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Curtis had been my champion from day one, promoting me when others thought I was too young, defending me when clients questioned working with a woman. I'd repaid his loyalty by walking away without a proper transition plan. "I should go," I said, gathering my things. "Richard's coming back from San Francisco tonight. We need to talk." "Whatever happens," Curtis said as we stood to leave, "don't be a stranger, okay?" I promised I wouldn't, though we both knew it was likely another lie. The drive back to our Pearl District condo gave me too much time to think. About Richard, about Whitman, about who I'd been before, and who I was now. The woman in the rearview mirror, with her elegant white hair and tired eyes, looked like a stranger. When I pulled into our building's underground parking, I sat in my car for several long minutes, gathering courage for whatever awaited me upstairs. Richard's text hadn't sounded promising. If the San Francisco investors had passed, we were out of options. Our condo was dark when I entered. I moved through the space, turning on lamps, running my fingers along the designer furniture we'd picked out together. So much of my life with Richard had been about appearances. The right address, the right restaurants, the right clothes. The substance, I was beginning to realize, had always been hollow. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto the balcony overlooking the Willamette River, waiting for Richard to arrive and for the next chapter of my life to begin. Richard didn't come home that night. At 2 a.m., I finally went to bed. My calls going straight to voicemail, my texts unanswered. By morning, Worry had displaced anger. This wasn't like him. For all his faults, Richard was reliable, compulsively so, often scheduling our arguments as if they were business meetings. I was on my second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Not Richard. He had keys. I opened the door to find a young man in a rumpled suit holding a manila envelope. "Eleanor Winters?" he asked, consulting a notepad. "Yes?" "I'm here on behalf of Richard Caldwell. He asked me to deliver this to you." He thrust the envelope toward me. "Where is he? Is he okay?" The young man, barely out of college it seemed, shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just the messenger, ma'am. Mr. Caldwell retained our firm yesterday afternoon. I don't know his whereabouts." I took the envelope. "What firm is that?" "Danvers and Klein. We're a law firm specializing in—" I know who Danvers and Klein are. They specialized in bankruptcies and corporate dissolutions. My stomach dropped. "Thank you." I closed the door and stared at the envelope in my hands. My name was written in Richard's distinctive scrawl across the front. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. Inside was a letter and a set of documents. The letter was brief. "Eleanor, by the time you read this, I'll be on my way to Singapore. Zhangtec has offered me a position developing their sustainable agriculture division. A fresh start. I've instructed my lawyers to dissolve EcoGrow. The remaining assets, what few there are, will be liquidated to pay our creditors. I've signed over my stake in the condo to you. It's underwater on the mortgage anyway. I'm sorry things ended this way. We had a good run. Richard." I read it 3 times, my mind refusing to process the words. Singapore? A good run? As if our relationship had been a moderately successful Broadway show, closing after mixed reviews. The documents confirmed what the letter stated. EcoGrow was being dissolved. Richard had signed over his half of the condo to me, along with the $7,000 monthly mortgage payment we could barely afford when there were 2 of us. And a final cruel detail. He'd emptied our joint business account before leaving. The $43,000 that remained, money we'd earmarked for operating expenses, gone. I sank onto the couch, the papers scattered around me. Richard was gone. EcoGrow was gone. My savings were gone. And I was left holding the bag, a very expensive, mortgage-leveraged bag. My phone rang, startling me. "Curtis, I was just checking in," he said when I answered. "You sounded down yesterday." A hysterical laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. "Down?" I was positively euphoric compared to how I feel today. "What happened?" "Richard's gone. Singapore, new job. He took what was left in our business account and left me with a failing company and a mortgage I can't afford." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "I'm coming over." "Curtis, no, you don't have to." "I'll bring lunch. Text me your address." An hour later, Curtis arrived with Thai food and a bottle of good scotch. I'd showered and changed, determined not to let him see me completely falling apart, though the red rims of my eyes betrayed my earlier breakdown. "Nice place," he said, looking around the condo with its floor-to-ceiling windows and open-concept design. "It is, for about 3 more months until the bank forecloses." We ate at the dining table, the skyline of Portland spread out before us. I told Curtis everything, the dissolution of EcoGrow, the emptied bank account, the underwater mortgage. "He can't just leave the country owing money," Curtis said, pouring us each a finger of scotch. "There are laws." Apparently not for Richard Caldwell. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. "His father is some big shot in international banking. He probably pulled strings. What will you do?" I shrugged. "Sell what I can. Look for work. Start over, I guess, about that." Curtis leaned forward. "I had another conversation with the board this morning." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "And they've agreed to bring you back as a consultant, at least initially. The Apex Digital deal is moving forward. They need someone who understands Whitman's culture, client relationships, someone who can help with the transition." "At what price?" 75% of your former salary for 6 months. After that, we renegotiate based on the new structure. It was less than I was worth, but more than I deserved after how I'd left. And infinitely better than bankruptcy. "Curtis," I began, not sure how to express my gratitude. He waved away my thanks. "Don't. I'm being selfish. The transition will be smoother with you involved. Plus, I missed having someone who gets my obscure movie references. We clinked glasses, the scotch burning pleasantly on the way down. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I listed the condo for sale, though my realtor warned me the market was soft, and we'd likely take a loss. I moved into a modest apartment in the Southeast District. No view, but also no crushing mortgage. I sold the designer furniture, my luxury car, even some of my jewelry. Each sale was painful but necessary. A shedding of the false life I'd built with Richard. My return to Whitman was equally humbling. My corner office was now occupied by a 30-something creative director named Zoe, with blue-tipped hair and an impressive portfolio of digital campaigns. I was assigned a small interior office and the unglamorous task of documenting client relationships and creative processes for the Apex digital transition team. Some of my former colleagues welcomed me back with genuine warmth. Others regarded me with barely concealed resentment or schadenfreude. The whispers followed me through the hallways. "Did you hear about Eleanor? Left for her younger boyfriend. Then he dumped her. Now she's back, tail between her legs." I kept my head high, my white hair a crown I refused to lower. Yes, I had made a mistake. Yes, I was starting over at nearly 60, but I was still Eleanor Winters, and I still had value to offer. 3 months into my consulting contract, Curtis called me into his office. The Apex digital deal was progressing, but there were complications. Their executive team wanted to replace most of Whitman's creative leadership with their own people. "They're making a mistake," Curtis said, pacing behind his desk. "Whitman's value is in its people, its relationships. Apex thinks they're buying a client list, but they're really buying a culture, a creative approach." I watched him pace, an idea forming. What if we showed them? Showed them what? The value of Whitman's approach, not tell them, show them. By the end of the day, we had a plan. The Henderson account, the one Whitman had lost after my departure, was currently with Apex's in-house agency. The results had been lackluster, with declining engagement metrics across all platforms. What if Whitman created a shadow campaign? Not to pitch to Henderson directly, but to show Apex what they were getting with the acquisition. Curtis loved it. He assigned me a small team: Zoe, the blue-haired creative director, Marcus, a data analyst, and Trey, a junior copywriter fresh out of advertising school. None of them had worked directly with me before, which meant no baggage, no preconceived notions. We worked nights and weekends, out of sight from the main Whitman team, and definitely hidden from the Apex transition consultants who now roamed our halls like corporate anthropologists, making notes on our strange tribal customs. The Henderson Shadow campaign took shape, a multi-platform approach that honored the client's conservative roots while pushing them into new digital territories. It was some of my best work, not despite my recent personal collapse, but because of it. I understood reinvention now. I understood loss and starting over. Themes that resonated deeply with Henderson's target demographic of midlife professionals. When we presented the Shadow campaign to Curtis, he was silent for a long moment. "This is brilliant," he finally said. "Absolutely brilliant." "Do we show Apex?" Zoe asked, her blue-tipped hair bobbing as she bounced on her toes, energized by the creative process in a way I recognized from my younger self. Curtis looked at me. "Eleanor, your call. I considered our options. No, we go bigger. We pitch it directly to Henderson." "That's risky," Marcus the data analyst warned. "They're with Apex now." "Exactly," I said, "and their numbers are tanking. They'll take the meeting." Curtis backed my play, using his long-standing relationship with Henderson's CEO to secure a pitch meeting. What we didn't expect was that Apex would be there too, represented by their chief creative officer, a shark-like woman named Victoria Walsh, who'd once worked for me as a junior copywriter at Whitman before defecting to a rival agency. "Eleanor," she said coolly when we entered the Henderson boardroom, "I heard you were back at Whitman, temporarily." "Victoria?" I replied with equal frost. "Congratulations on the promotion." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Henderson's executive team sat uncomfortably between us, clearly regretting agreeing to this awkward reunion. Our presentation was flawless. Zoe handled the creative walkthrough with passionate precision. Marcus delivered the data story with compelling clarity. Trey's copywriting sang without being showy. And I tied it all together, emphasizing how this approach honored Henderson's heritage while positioning them for future growth. Victoria's counter-arguments were predictable. Whitman was unstable, soon to be absorbed by Apex anyway. The campaign was clever but impractical. Henderson had already committed to Apex's strategy for the next fiscal year. When both sides had presented their cases, Henderson's CEO, Thomas Gardner, leaned forward. "I have a proposal," he said. "We run both campaigns. A/B test them in different markets. See which performs better." Victoria protested immediately. "That's not how creative campaigns work. You can't split test entire marketing strategies." "Actually," I interjected, "you can." "And we welcome the challenge," I looked Victoria directly in the eyes. "Unless you're not confident in your approach." The trap was set, and Victoria walked right into it. "Fine. Head-to-head comparison. May the best agency win." As we packed up our presentation materials, Thomas Gardner approached me. "It's good to see you back, Eleanor," he said quietly. "I was disappointed when you left Whitman. Your work always had something special. Heart, I guess. Like you really understood what we were trying to do." "Thank you, Thomas. That means a lot. And for what it's worth," he added, "I like the white hair. Suits you." I touched my hair self-consciously. When I'd started going gray in my 40s, I'd colored it religiously. It was Richard who'd encouraged me to let it go natural, saying it made me look distinguished, powerful. It was perhaps the one good piece of advice he'd given me. "Thank you," I said again. "I'm growing into it." Back at Whitman, Curtis was ecstatic. "Do you know what you've done? You've created leverage. If Henderson goes with our campaign, Apex will have to reconsider their creative leadership strategy." "If," I cautioned. "It's a big if. Have confidence, Eleanor. It's your best work in years." He was right. It was my best work in years. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost my creative fire at Whitman, settled into comfortable patterns and reliable approaches. It had taken losing everything, my career, my savings, my relationship, to reignite that spark. That night, I walked back to my modest apartment, past the food carts and vintage clothing stores of Southeast Portland. So different from the sleek luxury of the Pearl District condo. Yet somehow, I felt more at home here, among the young artists and aging hippies, the craft breweries and community gardens. My phone buzzed with a text. I expected Curtis with a follow-up thought about the Henderson pitch. Instead, it was from a number I didn't recognize, with a +165 country code. "Singapore. I made a mistake. I miss you. Things are good here. You could join me. Start fresh." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Richard Caldwell no longer had a place in my story. The results of the Henderson A/B test came in 6 weeks later. Our campaign had outperformed Apex's by 43% on engagement metrics and 27% on conversion. The numbers were unambiguous, the victory complete. Thomas Gardner personally called Curtis to inform him that Henderson was returning to Whitman, effective immediately, with a 3-year contract commitment. "And we want Eleanor to lead the account," he added, non-negotiable. Curtis relayed this information to me as we sat in his office, a bottle of champagne open between us. "So," he said, refilling my glass, "are you interested in a permanent position?" I sipped my champagne, considering. What about the Apex acquisition? That's the best part. Curtis couldn't contain his grin. "The board voted this morning. We're rejecting their offer." "What? Why?" "Because we have a better one." Thomas Gardner wasn't just impressed with the campaign, he was impressed with the agency behind it. Henderson Retail Group is diversifying into media. They want to buy a controlling interest in Whitman. I nearly choked on my champagne. Henderson wants to buy Whitman, 60% stake, but with guarantees of creative independence, current leadership structure maintained, and... He paused dramatically. They want to expand, open offices in Chicago, Atlanta, Denver, build Whitman into a national creative powerhouse. And you? Will you stay on as CEO? For 2 more years, then transition to chairman, which brings me to the next question. Curtis leaned forward. They want you on the executive leadership team, chief creative officer overseeing all offices. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Chief creative officer. A promotion from my previous role. At 58. After everything. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Eleanor. This is what you've worked for your entire career. Was it? I wasn't sure anymore. The past 6 months had changed me in ways I was still discovering. The old Eleanor would have said yes immediately, thrilled by the prestige, the challenge, the validation. But the new Eleanor, the one with the white hair and the hard-earned wisdom, hesitated. I need to think about it, I said finally. Curtis looked surprised. What's there to think about? It's the opportunity of a lifetime. It is. And 6 months ago, I walked away from Whitman because I thought I wanted something different, something meaningful. I made air quotes around the word. And now? Now I'm not sure what meaningful looks like for me. I set down my champagne glass. Give me the weekend? Curtis nodded, though he clearly didn't understand my hesitation. The weekend. But Henderson wants an answer by Monday. I spent Saturday walking the city, from the upscale boutiques of the Pearl District where I'd once shopped without looking at price tags, to the funky food cart pods of my new neighborhood. Portland was transforming, like me, holding on to its essential character while embracing necessary change. I found myself at the site where the Peterson building had stood. The demolition was complete now. The lot cleared for whatever would come next. A blank slate. My phone buzzed. Another text from Richard's Singapore number. He'd been sending them regularly for weeks, each more desperate than the last. I hadn't responded to any of them. The job isn't what they promised. I made a mistake leaving. We could still make EcoGrow work. I saved some of the IP. New investors are interested, or I deleted it without a second thought. Richard had shown me who he was, a man who ran when things got difficult, who abandoned commitments, who saw relationships as transactions. I deserved better. I always had. Sunday morning, I met Zoe for coffee at Lambert's. It had become our weekend ritual during the Henderson project, the seasoned creative director and the blue-haired upstart, sharing ideas and war stories. Curtis told me about the offer, she said, stirring her matcha latte. Chief Creative Officer. That's huge. It is. I wrapped my hands around my mug. What would you do? Me? Zoe looked surprised. I'd take it in a heartbeat. But I'm 34 with student loans and a toddler. Different life stage. And if you were my age? She considered this seriously. I'd still take it, I think, but I'd negotiate for what I really wanted. Which is? That's the question, isn't it? What do you really want, Eleanor? What did I want? Security, certainly. The past 6 months had taught me the value of a steady paycheck and sensible financial planning. But also freedom, autonomy, the space to create without office politics or corporate constraints. I thought about how alive I'd felt working on the Henderson Shadow campaign, how energized by collaborating with Zoe, Marcus, and Trey, teaching them, but also learning from them. Their fresh perspectives, their digital native instincts, their uncompromising idealism. I think, I said slowly, I want to build something. Not alone, like with Richard. But not within someone else's structure either. Zoe nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. Your own agency. Maybe. I don't know yet. But the idea of stepping back into the exact same life I had before, just with a better title, it feels like a missed opportunity somehow. So tell Henderson that. Tell Curtis. You make it sound so simple. Zoe shrugged. Sometimes it is. The hard part is knowing what you want. Monday morning, I walked into Curtis's office with a clear vision and a detailed proposal. Not an acceptance or a rejection, but an alternative path forward. I want to start a creative incubator within Whitman, I explained, sliding the proposal across his desk. A small, agile team focused on developing innovative campaigns for our most challenging clients. We'd operate semi-autonomously, with our own space, our own processes, but still under the Whitman umbrella. Curtis scanned the document, his expression unreadable. This isn't what Henderson offered, I know. But it might be what they need, what Whitman needs. I leaned forward. The Henderson campaign worked because we stepped outside the usual structures, because we combined experience with fresh perspectives. We can replicate that success. And you'd lead this incubator? Co-lead. With Zoe. I'd called her the night before, laying out my vision. She'd been enthusiastic, full of ideas for how we could structure the team, the projects we could pursue. Curtis leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You've changed, Eleanor." "Yes," I agreed. "I have." 6 months ago, you would have taken the CCO position without a second thought. 6 months ago, I thought I needed a man to give my life meaning. I've learned a few things since then. A smile tugged at the corner of Curtis's mouth. "I'll have to pitch this to Henderson. They were pretty set on you joining the executive team." "Tell them it's non-negotiable," I said. Echoing Thomas Gardner's words about my leadership of the Henderson account, Curtis laughed. "I will. And for what it's worth, I think you're right. This could be exactly what Whitman needs to stay relevant." 2 weeks later, Whitman Incubator had a green light and a budget. Zoe and I leased a converted warehouse space in the industrial district, separate from Whitman's downtown headquarters, but close enough for regular collaboration. We built a team of 12, a mix of Whitman veterans and fresh talent, strategists and creatives, data analysts and platform specialists. Our first client? Henderson, of course. But others quickly followed, companies facing disruption, seeking reinvention, hungry for creative approaches that broke with convention while delivering measurable results. We worked differently at the incubator. No corner offices, no rigid hierarchies, just a team of talented people united by a shared vision of what advertising could be at its best. Truthful, meaningful, effective. I still had my modest apartment in Southeast Portland, though I could now afford something more upscale if I wanted. But I'd come to appreciate the simplicity of my new life, the freedom that came with wanting less, needing less. 6 months after the incubator launched, I received a final text from Richard. "I'm back in Portland. Can we meet? For closure, if nothing else." This time I responded, "There's nothing to discuss. I wish you well, but our chapter is closed." He didn't text again. A year to the day after the Peterson building demolition, I stood at the same spot with Curtis, watching the new structure take shape. A mixed-use development with affordable housing units, co-working spaces, and a rooftop urban farm using hydroponic technology. "Ironic, isn't it?" Curtis mused. Richard's idea was sound. His execution was the problem. "Most ideas are sound in the abstract," I replied. "It's the implementation that separates success from failure." "Speaking of success," Curtis said, "the board approved the expansion. Whitman Incubator Chicago opens next quarter. They want you to oversee the launch." I smiled, tucking a strand of white hair behind my ear. The wind had picked up, carrying the promise of rain. "I'll think about it." Curtis laughed. "You always say that now, and I always mean it." I looked up at the skeletal framework of the new building rising from the ruins of the old. "Thinking before leaping, that's my new philosophy." "It suits you," Curtis said. "The whole package does. You seem content." I am, I realized, surprised by the truth of it. Not because I got it all back, the title, the prestige, the paycheck, but because I lost everything and discovered what actually matters. We turned away from the construction site and walked toward Lambert's for coffee. The routine unchanged, yet everything different. My white hair caught the weak Portland sunlight, gleaming like a crown of hard-earned wisdom. Ahead of me lay possibilities I couldn't have imagined a year ago, not a second chance at my old life, but a first chance at a new one, created entirely on my own terms. I hadn't gotten it all back after all. I'd gotten something better. Myself.